I'm sitting in the Haven Motel in Queens, New York City. It's a motel known to be a hotbed of drugs, prostitution, and crime. 19-year-old Corinna Slusser was in this hotel, potentially this very room, moments before she vanished, never to be seen or heard from again. Corinna is from a small Pennsylvania town and had only been in New York City for 2 months. How did she end up here?
I'm in New York City to investigate the disappearance of Corinna Slusser. Let's dive in. Oftentimes when someone goes missing, there's very little information to go off of to try to locate them.
That's why the last place they were seen is incredibly important to understand, inside and out. Where is it located? Why were they there? Does anything stand out as abnormal? Well, to answer this, we just need to understand a little about the Haven Motel. When I called to book a room for the night to film, they told me they don't do overnights on the weekends. This motel mainly does what's called short stays, selling rooms for 3 to 4 hour blocks. I think you can see where this is going. If it seems like I'm talking kind of softly in this room, it's because I am. The walls are relatively thin and I've heard a few things going on here already. If I talked much louder than this, I think people might even be able to make out what I'm saying, knowing that this hotel likely profits a lot from certain types of business, and knowing that there's likely pimps in this hotel right now. I don't want to be heard. I don't want people at this hotel understanding what I'm saying, so that's why I'm talking a little quieter in here. The timeline of Corinna's case is pretty unusual. In early August of 2017, Corinna's living a relatively normal life in small town Pennsylvania. Just weeks later, she's allegedly slammed up against the wall by a pimp named Giovanni Piguero, who had already been arrested 9 times for things like assault, drug charges, and promoting prostitution. Just weeks after that, she's seen with a different pimp and then vanishes. How does all of this happen so quickly? Okay, I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning. Before diving into Corinna's story, we need to answer this question. What does the world of prostitution look like in New York City today? How do things work here? To be honest, I was a little nervous about going into some of these places with a big camera to film, but was determined to find answers. First, some definitions. A pimp is a man who controls prostitutes and arranges clients for them. A prostitute is a person who engages in sexual activity for payment. And a John is a customer who purchases the woman or man for sexual purposes.
You know, being here in New York City, I've kind of discovered that there's 3 ways in which this can kind of start. And there might be more, but these are just the 3 that I encountered.
First was old school street walking. I'm not going to name the specific locations I found the prostitutes, as I don't want to promote it or make it easier for people online to find, but after some digging, I was able to find some street names. I made my way to the area and it wasn't long before I saw them. They essentially just walked around the block until someone pulled up to them. Sometimes they would talk for a moment and the car would drive away, and sometimes they would get in the car with the John.
How you doing?
Hi, are you police?
Nope, I'm not.
What are you looking for? I don't have a full service.
So I've got an odd question, and if it's no, then I totally understand, but I'm a YouTuber working on a story.
I asked a few girls for interviews, but was unsuccessful in getting one. The second way prostitutes connected with Johns was through massage parlors. There's a street in New York City where this type is extremely prevalent. Walking around, you can tell that the whole massage parlor cover is a pretty thin veil.
They are hyper aware of cameras. When I started walking around with my camera, as soon as they saw it, they yelled at all the other girls around them and they went inside. They covered their faces and they went inside. And they spot these things quick. I think one of the sketchier things is knowing that, you know, I could spot the girls pretty easily, but there's definitely guys and pimps out there watching me too. No doubt I was spotted by them. I just couldn't tell who they were.
I wanted to film the start of an interaction with a girl, so I brought a hidden camera with me. This was the second time I had walked past these girls and made eye contact, and you can see she waves me over.
Can I ask how much? Can I ask how much? How much? How much? 60 for what? Everything?
Massage?
Oh, massage?
Yeah.
60 for massage? Okay.
That's what I'm talking.
I'll be back. Thank you.
The last way I saw that prostitutes connected with Johns was online. This is the avenue that Corinna used, and we'll go over that more later, but essentially there's just websites where girls and their pimps can post ads with their phone numbers. Johns will reach out and they will often meet at a motel, much like the one I'm in now. I was kind of shocked at how out in the open all of this was. How could these women be so blatant and obvious in a place where prostitution is illegal? The next question we need to answer is, how does a small town teenager end up in the metaphorical chains of sex trafficking in New York City? What went wrong here? Well, we need to understand what Corinna was dealing with before making the big move to the city. Digital evidence always plays a big role in these investigations. Have you ever Googled yourself and were shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? There is tons of digital information out there online about pretty much everyone. Trust me, I know this fact better than most because oftentimes I'm the one scouring the internet to find information on people. I want to thank Aura for sponsoring this video and making this trip to New York City possible. I remember using these resources that I developed to look into myself and see what was out there. I was shocked at just how much personal information there was about me online. Addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, information on people I was related to or close to. There's even an email address listed for a girl I dated in high school, and I'm currently 34 years old. All of this information is available to companies called data brokers who use your personal information as their product and sell it to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn more about you. Or will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll even opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T revealed that over 73 million customer records were released on the dark web. They recommended those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Aura does all of this for me, and I don't have to download several different apps just because one company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I wouldn't really worry because Aura is always on and always doing the hard work of keeping me safe online. I really value my privacy, and I value yours. You can use my link, aura.com/EricAllen, to try 2 weeks completely free and see how many data brokers are sharing your information. The link is in the description below. Again, that's aura.com/EricAllen to start protecting your personal information online. Back to the video. Corinna Slusser grew up in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, where she lived with her mother, Sabina. Bloomsburg, a little spot on the map with just under 14,000 people, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. And for a while there, Corinna's business was being the all-American girl, a cheerleader with big dreams of making it as a makeup artist someday.
Let's start off by saying Corinna was a really good child. She was a cheerleader, she was involved in track. She wanted to actually come up with her own YouTube channel. She wanted to come out with her own skin line. Friends of hers would come to her and say, do my makeup for homecoming, do my makeup for prom, do my hair. Like, she was so good at it. She had a sense of fashion, so she kind of wanted to take that further.
While in high school, she participated in track and cheerleading, and according to her mom and social media, she had a lot of friends. However, as she entered her senior year, things started to change for Corinna. Her friends, who were mostly a year ahead of her, had just graduated, and her mom said this was when things abruptly changed. The once joyful teen veered into a life marked by alcohol, drugs, and partying, a shift that could be seen in her social media accounts. And it wasn't just drugs and partying. Days before her 18th birthday, Corinna and a friend were arrested for shoplifting at a local dollar store.
I'm a single mother. Her father's not in her life. I worked third shift as a nurse for Geisinger, and her last 2 years of high school, I noticed things just started happening. You know, you think it's teenage years. She got caught underage drinking at one point. Her last year in the fall, she got caught shoplifting. So all these different things leading up to what's going on, and her grades started declining.
Her mom managed to convince her to finish her senior year at a charter school with online classes, but Corinna struggled with that as well. She ended up not attending her online classes and never received her high school diploma. It might be easy for some to cast judgment on Sabina, questioning why she didn't do more to enforce stricter rules. But I think these critiques overlook the reality of their circumstances. As a single mother working night shifts to keep the household afloat, Sabina was fighting an uphill battle. And things only got worse for Corinna. On January 3rd, she tweeted text messages that she had sent to her mother saying, "I need things to change. I need to be happy. I lost motivation and goals because of how unhappy I've been. I hate myself, and I need to teach myself to love me and you. I want us to do it together." Like most girls her age, Corinna was very active on social media, Most of the pictures you see of her in this video actually come from Instagram and Facebook. She not only enjoyed posting, but also followed many celebrities and influencers.
I don't currently have kids, but I hope to one day. That said, there is a huge part of me that's just terrified at the thought of raising a girl in this modern world. We all understand that social media and the internet have dramatically changed our world, but I think one day humans will look back on this time and rightfully think we greatly underestimated its influence, especially on kids that are growing up with it. We're living in this weird transitional time where the parents raising these kids just have no idea what it's like to be a developing child in the world of social media companies. I think about my future daughter, looking at and comparing herself to these influencers online, and honestly, it terrifies me. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole researching the effects of social media on young people, but I think it's important to cover to understand how a girl like Corinna could end up prostituting herself in New York City.
Instagram use is linked with depression, lower self-esteem, appearance anxiety, and body dissatisfaction. And many of these symptoms are correlated with simply posting selfies. And when you extrapolate out the data, things just keep getting worse. Suicide rates among young people have increased massively from 1999 until 2014, resulting in suicide being the second leading cause of death for adolescents. This is a huge indicator of the state of mental health among our youth. And you have a recipe for disaster when you pair all of that with the fact that these pimps can use these social media platforms to reach vulnerable girls, many of whom they would never have had access to before the world of social media. Unfortunately, just a couple months after attempting to mend her relationship with her mother, Corinna attempts to kill herself.
She tried to commit suicide that April. She was in the hospital for 2.5 weeks. She was in ICU for over a week. And then she was in the psych ward for 72 hours. We had group counseling, and not once did she tell them anything about drugs, anything about what she was doing, whatever she was going through. She just basically acted like she only smoked weed, and obviously there was stuff going on the whole time, but she didn't let them know.
Corinna recovers, is discharged, and then is transferred to the hospital's psychiatric unit for 3 days of observation.
I thought about this moment a lot while creating this documentary. I feel like the time after a suicide attempt is an opportunity for someone to get better. It's like a wake-up call for them and their family and friends. If the person can get some help, then their life can take a drastic turn in the right direction.
And Corinna's life did take a drastic turn, but unfortunately in the wrong direction. A friend of Corinna's says that when she visited Corinna in the hospital, she was texting a guy from New York. I'm not entirely sure, but it's likely this man is Giovanni Peguero. Giovanni was 32 years old at the time and would later become Corinna's pimp. Upon some digging, I did find that there are Pegueros in the nearby town of Hazleton, though I'm not 100% sure that they're related. Shortly after being discharged from the hospital, Corinna actually moved to Hazleton, where she lived with a friend of hers for about 2 months.
It's not the best place to live. There's a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, just a lot of bad stuff there. And I kind of begged her. I said, don't go, because I had a feeling it would be bad, and that was the last time I saw her. We were still in contact. I would text her, and we would talk on the phone.
Corinna's time in Hazleton only lasted about 2 months. We don't know a ton of the details about this situation, but apparently she wasn't paying rent where she was living. Her roommates locked her out and told her she could get her stuff back when she paid the overdue rent. This type of situation is perfect for a pimp or human trafficker. Corinna is vulnerable and desperate, with nothing but her cell phone and the clothes on her back. The roommates recall a man picking Corinna up and telling them that Corinna didn't need any of her stuff back, that he would buy her all new clothes. Again, I think this man is Giovanni Peguero.
Next thing you know, I'm on Facebook, and she's in Brooklyn, New York.
I remember as I drove into the city from the small town of Beaufort, South Carolina, where I live, it felt like I was entering a different planet, and I could only imagine what Corinna must have felt coming from Bloomsburg as a 19-year-old. According to Sabina, she sent Corinna a text asking what she was doing in New York, and Corinna said she was just visiting and had no plans of staying in the city. But Corinna did stay in the city, at least for the next 6 weeks, until something happened, and she vanished. So what do we know about that 6 weeks? Well, pretty quickly, ads for Corinna started popping up on escort sites. She went by the name Carissa and described herself as laid back yet professional, young, beautiful, slim, thick, blonde.
I was wondering how these sites are legal. Isn't it illegal to advertise prostitution? Well, it is, but there are loopholes.
These ads are for escorting. Escorting technically isn't illegal, as it involves paying someone to spend time with you, out at dinner or out on a boat, for example. But oftentimes, escorting leads to prostitution or paying for sex, and both the advertiser and customer know this. I was interested not just to find out the differences between escorts and prostitution, but how sex trafficking connects all of this. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. It involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to make an adult engage in commercial sex acts. Traffickers often find victims on the internet, social media, local communities, clubs, bars, or even schools. Trafficking can happen in any community, and victims can be anyone. It's really hard to get accurate data on this type of thing, but the number of women trafficked in the United States every year is well into the thousands. Sex trafficking only exists because buyers fuel the market with their money.
So after all of this, you might be wondering, why didn't Corinna just leave? Well, in many cases, people in sex trafficking situations do not see themselves as victims while they're being trafficked. They have been so expertly manipulated or groomed that they believe they're making their own choice to engage in these commercial sexual activities.
Traffickers often use the lure of protection, love, adventure, and opportunity to entice victims into their control, and then use drugs, fear, intimidation, threats, and violence to ensure compliance to their demands. Because of the social stigma that exists around this topic, including the idea that victims are complicit in their own trafficking, victims often go unidentified until it's too late. Escaping the life seems unattainable, further marginalizing them and committing them to a life of abuse and exploitation. Anyways, unlike many people who get caught up in the world of prostitution, Corinna kept up with the people from back home, her mother and aunt included, but she wasn't honest with them about what life was really like in New York City.
She's like, I'm fine, I'm okay. I'm like, what are you doing for work? Like, 'cause she was going to get some studio apartment, and she was telling me she was doing something with payroll. Like, she never gave me anything that she was doing what she was doing.
It's August 25th, around 1 p.m. at the Harlem Vista Motel in New York City.
Corinna hops out of the shower, gets dressed, and grabs her pocketbook to head out, but she notices something is missing.
The $300 cash she had in her pocketbook is gone. This is a big deal for Corinna. She's not made of money, and she's trying to survive in the expensive city of New York. Who could have taken it? Well, the only person she could think that had access to it, that she knew was there while she was in the shower, was Giovanni.
Corinna might be a girl from a small town, but she's not a pushover. She confronts Giovanni. Maybe up to this point, Giovanni had positioned himself as someone who was there to help Corinna. He was a friend who could give her an opportunity to change her life. But in this moment, Corinna saw Giovanni's true colors.
According to Corinna, when she confronted Giovanni about the $300, he grabbed her by the throat and slammed her up against the wall. The man she thought was going to be her ticket to a better life was now a man she feared. She called 911 as soon as she could and was later taken to the hospital. This type of act is pretty common among those who traffic women. They start out positioning themselves as someone who is friendly, who can help, then transition themselves to someone who has control via fear. 3 days later, Giovanni is arrested and charged with assault, harassment, and criminal obstruction of breathing or blood circulation. The judge issues a 6-month order of protection against Giovanni. He's not even allowed to have any communication with Corinna, no texts, calls, or social media. If he violated this order, he could face up to 7 years in prison. Giovanni posts his $1,000 bail and is released from jail. Back in Bloomsburg, Corinna's mother is oblivious to what is really happening to her daughter in New York City.
I also saw that I got an alert. I got scared because it's 911. It alerts me if someone calls 911. So, I'm all freaking out. Days went by. I didn't know anything. Finally get a hold of Corinna. She tells me that she's fine. It's okay. Some guy choked her, took her money. I'm oblivious. I'd never thought it's a pimp or anything. I don't think of those things. So she says she's fine. She's like, he went to jail, but he's already bailed out on $1,000 and he was looking for her. And I'm like, get your butt home. A couple weeks later, the protection from abuse where she got a PFA against him, it came in the mail.
Prostitution in New York City is extremely dangerous. Just recently, a prostitute was found dead in a 55-gallon barrel after going missing in Manhattan. Violence like this happens all too often. Corinna, a small-town girl from Pennsylvania, was in the big city and lost the one person who promised to take care of her.
Once you're in that life, it's just pretty hard to get out. Corinna thought that filing a police report and getting a protection order would be enough, but guys like Giovanni are part of a predator ecosystem. When one gets locked up, another one takes his place.
Ishiwani was a 21-year-old aspiring rapper, and he became Corinna's new pimp.
Hey man, say man, prosperity and positivity roll hand in hand, man. Stay away from them I can't do it ass niggas. Niggas that's always defeating you and defeating themselves.
We don't know exactly how Ishi and Corinna first met, but we do know in 2015 he was convicted of felony attempted robbery and was sentenced to 1 year in prison. We don't know everything that happened in the final days leading up to Corinna's disappearance, but we do know a few things. This is going to be more of a rapid-fire list of things that seem to be important, but at this time, how they all fit together is still a mystery. On September 3rd, Ishi posts this photo of him, Corinna, and another one of his girls, Jessica. Between September 5th and 7th, Ishi posts multiple ads for Corinna, even posting an ad for her with his other girl, Jessica, a two-girl special. On September 7th, Corinna posts about getting an apartment. The price for this apartment is $750 a month, unrealistically cheap for an apartment in New York City, and some speculate that she posted this so her friends and family would think she was doing just fine in the city. On September 10th, Corinna makes her very last social media post. It was later confirmed that the person in this photo was a friend of Ishi's. On the 16th, Ishi sends Corinna a picture of himself, Corinna, and Jessica. On September 20th, she's seen leaving the Haven Motel, the one I'm sitting in, and never seen again. So let's dive into what we know about that day. According to court documents, Ishi was with Corinna at the Haven Motel in the early morning hours. Him and Corinna had a falling out because Jessica was jealous of Corinna. Corinna leaves. This is the last time she is physically seen, but she was active on her phone that day. At 5:40 that morning, Corinna calls a friend of hers and leaves a voicemail.
Katie, as soon as you wake up, you better tell me everything that happened with me. She cheated on you for 2 months, you need to know? You need to tell me everything. Text me everything, tell me if you're okay, alright?
Her friend said that she sounded frantic and speculated that Corinna was kind of calling for help, but didn't want to say it in the voicemail.
There's a pretty big gap of time where we don't know what Corinna was up to, but we know Corinna called her mother around 5 p.m. that day.
Then my dad passed away September 14th, and then I told her my dad passed away, and I told her I was going to my dad's funeral because it was in Florida. She said, I don't have any identification. I don't have any this. She was telling me she was going to try to get a train, which, whatever. She was going to try to get there. And that was basically the last time I talked to her. And she told me that she did beg me to come home. She said, I want to come home. I'm coming home. And I gave her like a list of stuff I expected if she was to come home. I was like, well, you need to go back to school. You need to get a job. You need to do this, this, and this. And she was totally like, I'm not going back to school. I'm going to go get my GED. And we were like back and forth. And that was the last time I talked to her. I said, we will talk about all this after I get back from Florida. And I never spoke to her again.
And she must have been feeling pretty desperate, as just a few hours later, she reaches out to the man that had recently assaulted her. It's 7:04 p.m., and Corinna messages Giovanni on Facebook. This text exchange is not public, but apparently the New York Post got access to see some of it. Here's an excerpt from their article. Slusser texted him around 7 p.m. and told him that Woney had left her in Queens with no money and food, and that she needed his help, the messages show. I'm just scared to come to you because of everything, Slusser wrote to Peguero, an apparent reference to his alleged assault against her. Peguero indicated that he would pick up Slusser, but only if she was willing to get back to work, the texts show. Slusser fired back, if you missed me, you wouldn't say first thing, is she gonna work for me? You'd worry about my well-being and get me without stipulation. You care about money, not me. But after a few hours passed, Slusser appeared more desperate for Peguero's help, and the two made plans to meet up, the texts show. Although it's not clear if they ever got together. After that night, the teen was never heard from again. So who was it that took Corinna? Was it Giovanni? Was it Ishi? Was it a customer? A few days go by and Sabina has not heard from Corinna.
So when I got back, I just called one of her friends and I was like, have you heard from Corinna? Because I can't get a hold of her. They said, well, she last posted on Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, on this and this date. And she was very avid on social media. Like, she would be on social media on Twitter and Snapchat. And so I went to my police station and I reported her missing. They didn't look at it like she was a missing person. They looked at her like she was a willing participant because of all this. She's over 18. She wasn't missing. So this just went on, and then more detectives got involved. And then, next thing you know, it hit social media. And I don't think they really considered her a missing person until the springtime, to be honest. Because that's when she went in the NAMUS or whatever that is, where they put her in as a missing person.
We've talked a lot about the negatives of social media, but it has its positives too. Corinna's story hits social media and starts gaining some attention.
That's when they came to my house and got my DNA. The FBI and the detectives came to my house twice. They went through her room with gloves, took some things to get her stuff, get clues, everything that they could possibly get to get information, her tablet. They took DNA samples from me. So now she's considered an actual missing person.
The police investigate Ishi. While they don't find enough evidence to charge him with Corinna's disappearance, they do find evidence of him trafficking and promoting prostitution and charge him for it. It's November of 2019, and Sabina is sitting in the courtroom as Ishi is being sentenced for trafficking her missing daughter. As Corinna's mother, she gets an opportunity to give a victim's impact statement. She stands to speak to the judge. Where is Corinna? Is she dead or alive? Who is the last person he handed her off to? Sabina said through tears. Please, Ishi, disclose where my child is. Ishi says nothing. The judge begins to explain that she can't force Ishi to answer any questions, but is cut off when Ishi stands up. He turns around, looks Sabina in the eye, and says, honestly, I don't know. I never passed her off to anybody. Is she dead or alive? I'm honestly not sure. But I pray she's alive. The judge then lays down the sentence. She explains that Ishi's mental health disorders, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, play a part in her sentencing. She then gives Ishi 15 years in prison. I looked into Ishi and found that he grew up in a pretty decent family. His father is a professional photographer with a background in human services and social work. His mother is a social worker with a degree in interdisciplinary studies focused on childhood education and psychology, and his brother is a college graduate who volunteers with the Boys and Girls Club of America. I think this is fascinating because it highlights a recurring theme that we're seeing in this episode. People from good environments taking drastic turns for the worst. This makes me wonder if the internet is to blame here. Even with positive influences growing up, anyone is just a screen away from the worst parts of society. Anyways, similar to Ishi, Giovanni was investigated in connection with Corinna's disappearance. The local police department in Pennsylvania even wrote in a report that, quote, given Peguero's background, there is a concern that he may be hiding Slusser against her will and prostituting her out for money. In May of 2018, Giovanni, along with a man named Marcus McWright, are charged with promoting prostitution. The charges are for activities ranging from June 7th, 2017 to October 13th, 2017. The court documents say, quote, knowingly advanced and profited from prostitution by managing, supervising, controlling, and owning, either alone or in association with others, a house of prostitution and a prostitution business and enterprise. They don't say these charges are specifically related to Corinna, but it's easy to speculate that they are.
One more interesting thing to note about this is that Marcus McWright, the man who I mentioned earlier who was arrested with Giovanni, lived in Jamaica, Queens. And we later learned that Jamaica, Queens also just so happens to be the last place that Corinna's cell phone pinged before it ultimately went dark.
Sabina showed up to one of Giovanni's hearings and went up and spoke with him in the hallway. She actually recorded this conversation.
Listen, when she met me, I swear to God, I seen her, I said, it's a beautiful Caucasian, I'm not dumb. I said, I'm gonna upgrade this girl. I took a screenshot, baby. She bought a wild clothes.
I wanna know, where do you think happened?
I honestly think that she's alive, that she's trying to live life in New York City without I don't know. I think she just trying to like explore. I believe that she's gonna come at you.
Is she smart enough to realize?
Nah.
He's sentenced for 2 to 5 years for the promoting prostitution charges as well as some drug charges that he had picked up. I actually messaged Giovanni in prison asking for an interview, but he was going after money, and I didn't feel right paying him for an interview. So what else do we know? Over the years, various tips have come in regarding Corinna's whereabouts. In the spring of 2018, Sabina received a letter at her home in Bloomsburg. It was from a man named Carlos C., who claimed he saw Corinna running after a friend of his. Here's a few parts of that letter. I remember I saw this girl was nearby 67th Road at September 26, 2017, around 8:30 p.m. My wife, my child, and I were going a restaurant on Queens Boulevard. After dinner, we run into my friend, but this girl was following him. I remember her because she was shouting, "I am going to sue you, rat minor. Even you are a doctor." Also, she is a beautiful girl, but she looked like to use drug. Her face was terrible, like confusion. Her clothes was neat. My friend run fast. I texted him to ask about the situation. He didn't answer me. Nothing came of this tip, and no good information could be found about the man in the letter. Some speculate this letter was actually from the person responsible for Corinna's disappearance, that it was sent to muddy the waters of the investigation. About 7 months after Corinna went missing, Sabina received some interesting text messages.
I had people contacting me, trying to extort money from me, saying they knew where Corinna was. There's like 300 messages. But this person, whoever this person was, is either involved in pimping because he knew a lot. He knew a lot, like you'd believe it. Like that's how much information he gave me. Or he did know of Corinna or knew Corinna because he told me that my daughter was in North Carolina. So this is how desperate I am to get my daughter. I went and got a loan because they were asking me for money to go get my daughter. They wanted money for they wanted me to buy my daughter. Because if not, my daughter was going to be sold to another pimp. So first he wanted me to send it to North Carolina. It didn't go through. Then he said, ship it to this California address. I will physically bring it. That's what I told him. I was going to physically bring the money. I had the cash. I even showed them the cash. I took a picture of it and said, this money is yours. I will meet you and you deliver my daughter. He wasn't willing to do that. So they came to the understanding that it was a scam.
It's November of 2017, and a detective in Grand Prairie, Texas, receives a tip that Corinna is being held there.
The day I got it was November 9th, 2017. The supervisor brings me a Crime Stopper tip from the NYPD Human Trafficking Task Force informing that a female by Corinna Slusser is being held by a person in Grand Prairie, Texas. So I take this information and contact investigator in New York. Basically, all he had was what the tip said. Corinna's been moved.
Unfortunately, nothing panned out from this tip, but when doing some deep digging, I did find that there were Pegueros in the Grand Prairie, Texas area. I even found that one owned a trucking and logistics company. I found a few interesting addresses for this Peguero. One in Irving, a bordering city to Grand Prairie, one in North Carolina, and one in the Bronx, New York. Could his shipping and logistics company be involved in trafficking people or drugs? Does Giovanni have any connection with this Peguero? I couldn't find anything else down this rabbit hole, and honestly, there's a good chance that this is all just a coincidence, but I did find it interesting. So, what happened to Corinna?
Well, some people speculate that she was trafficked and is still alive somewhere out there, essentially in captivity. This is possible, but I don't think it's very likely. From the information we have, I don't think we can make a super strong case either way. But if I had to give a theory, and I want to stress that this is just a theory, I think the most likely scenario would be this.
Corinna did meet with Giovanni that night after leaving the Haven Motel, but when they meet up, things go south and they get into some sort of argument. Giovanni has a protection order against him. He's not even supposed to message Corinna on Facebook, let alone actually be anywhere near her.
But here he is with a girl who could get him up to 7 years in prison if she told the police that he violated his protection order.
Giovanni is already angry from this altercation, and that, paired with the idea of getting charged for violating his protection order, sends him over the edge. This is the man who allegedly grabbed Corinna by the neck, choking her as he pushed her up against the wall, all for being accused of stealing a few $100. What would this kind of guy do in a situation where where this girl could send him to prison. Well, Corinna can't send him to prison if she's dead, so Giovanni does what he feels he has to. There's not enough information to even speculate how the rest played out, and honestly, we don't have enough information to have tons of confidence that that potential situation is the reason for Corinna's disappearance, but in my opinion, it's the most likely. Corinna's story isn't a normal true crime story. It's a story about a young, outgoing, bubbly cheerleader who liked to explore nature and laugh with her friends. A pretty normal young girl like many of us have known, whose life took such a drastic turn that within a pretty short time, she found herself routinely sitting in hotel rooms in New York City with men that were paying her for her time, body, and soul. This is a story about just how fast life can transform. This is also a story about predators, a story about how the human mind has the capacity to exploit others for personal gain. You know, after being here and seeing the things that I've seen, it's going to be hard to leave New York happy. But I think I can leave New York hopeful. Going into these stories, I always hope that, you know, shining a light on this, or maybe in my research and investigation, I can somehow increase, just by a little bit, the odds of a case being solved or family finding answers. At the end of this video, I gotta be honest, I don't think I increased the odds that much. I wasn't able to really uncover anything or provide some unique perspective that no one else has. But from my time here, from my research, from filming and traveling in this crazy city, I think this video can do some really good things. Can prevent someone like Corinna from falling into the same trap that she did. Maybe a parent is watching and they're gonna pay a little closer attention to what their son or daughter is doing on social media. Or maybe someone young around Corinna's age is watching and doesn't quite understand how, you know, a pimp or someone online messaging them can be manipulative. They don't know the signs, and maybe after this video they do. So while I'm not leaving New York City happy, I am leaving New York City hopeful. The audio of Corinna's mother, Sabina, was from the Vanished podcast, and I'd encourage you to check it out if you want to hear more. I would be honored if you subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another investigation, YouTube thinks you'll like this one. See y'all next time.